Credit union community, here are your 3 topics for today's show. First up, Gallup found that only 22% of employees leave jobs for better pay. Next, branch visits have dropped 55% since 2019. So how do you build community when there's no building or branch? And last up, starting January 1st, credit union boards are required to have a legit succession plan. So what does that actually mean in practice? Welcome to Grow Your Credit Union, the podcast where credit union leaders gather, learn, and grow. I am your host, Joshua Barclay, and today I am joined by a guest co-host brought to us by our sponsor, James McBride. James, nice to see you again.
Man, it is always fun to be here. Glad to be on with you.
Glad to have you back, James. Before we begin today's show, I want to first mention our sponsor, CU Benefit. CU Benefit helps credit unions find smarter investment strategies that cover 100% of employee benefit expenses while significantly boosting net income. You will hear more about CU Benefit later in the show. James, New Year's resolutions. We're in the new year. Do we even pay attention to this anymore? I'll start with you.
You know what, man? Like for me, I'm in the thick of it, man. I'm about to move from Virginia to Tennessee, and my New Year's resolution is to stop falling off ladders and to get to Tennessee safely and get my business going so we can help more credit unions.
That's true. You are leaving. I can see you in an empty room right now for the listeners. He really is moving to Tennessee. I think I started my New Year's resolution like a month before January 1st, and mine was just simply to wake up earlier, try to get my workouts done first thing in the morning instead of putting them off until the evening. And I started a month before because I feel like I had to wean my way into it. My other goal is learn Portuguese, that one's not going so well, but we'll see. I'll update you on that later. All right. Today's guest is the creator of CU Benefit, David Sims. Welcome to the show, David.
Hey, thanks guys for having me.
Retaining talent is still a problem for credit unions. Today, many credit unions see annual frontline turnover hovering around 20 to 24%, according to Retensa, and the pressure isn't easing. Gallup reports that 51% of U.S. employees are watching or actively seeking a new job. Leaders often assume churn is primarily salary-driven, but Gallup found that only 22% of employees cite pay as their reason for leaving. David, let me start with you here. How should credit union leaders rethink growth and development to hold on to their talent so we can, compete with these fintechs and these banks?
I definitely agree with you that it's a total package that is determining whether or not employees leave or stay. Salary is obviously, compensation is an important part of that, but we're seeing now where the studies are coming back where they care more about work-life balance, remote working, can they work from home? Are they getting health benefits, retirement benefits? One of the fastest growing benefits out there is tuition reimbursement. So it's kind of an ever-changing landscape of what is being needed out there. And I don't think there's any one solution fits all type of thing. It is really kind of meeting the employees, even at different generations, of what their needs are and being able to offer almost like a buffet of different types of benefits that's going to retain them and make them feel rewarded, because people stay who feel that they are contributing and valued part of the team.
James, David mentions these benefits. So salary is not the reason why most people leave. As David mentions, there's a buffet of benefits that employees are really taking a liking to. That's going to help retain them and keep them at the credit union. Talk to me about the challenges, because obviously you have been a credit union leader for a very long time. What are the challenges to get that buffet of benefits to your employee?
Well, let's start first by acknowledging that credit unions tend to want to stay in a bubble. So we think about our world in this bubble. The reality is there isn't a credit union in America that really isn't considered a small business when you look at the other conglomerations and corporations that are out there, right? So you have to couch that in. Your employees are thinking about you as a small business. And so one of the things that they're thinking about is, what are the opportunities going to be for me to actually progress in my career? And if I'm able to progress in my career, am I going to be able to do that here? And the smaller the organization gets, the harder that becomes to deliver when you think about it in the traditional paycheck health benefits scenario. So you got to be thinking bigger than that. Employees today want to know what's going to be available to them years from now. They're already thinking about, how do I maximize my wealth potential so that I can get to the other end, right? So that's something that's different than a lot of the traditional credit union leaders. And so one of the things that I like to do when I come on the show is say outlandish things. Well, here it is. Most of the people that are sitting in C-suite chairs today want the credit union of old. They want it to be the way that it was when they were coming up, whenever that was. And the reality is those days are gone. So we've got to start moving towards, what do the people want today? So it's not just salary. It's salary plus where am I going? Plus, what are you doing for my family? Plus, what are you doing for all these ancillary things? And oh, by the way, I want that work-life balance too. So how do I get all of that in one place? And where credit unions struggle is they go, well, we can't figure out a way to fund that. We can't figure out a way to pay for that. And you've got to be creative, which is why there are opportunities out there these days, if you're thinking about it, in new ways to actually capitalize on that and give employees a comp plan that actually isn't tied to the way that it was when they were children. It's tied to the way that it needs to be for them today for their children.
David, I'm going to swing it to you now. For my original question to James, he jumped the gun on mine. He gave me more than what I deserve on my initial question. But back to you, James laid out there's an old way of thinking, the old guard way of thinking in the credit union space. And there's the new guard, which is thinking about helping employees, helping their families, helping them get to where they want to go. What are the challenges with providing those benefits right now? Because if it were that easy, heck, I could sprinkle my employees down with all the benefits they need and I would be able to retain them. But that is not what's happening.
Yeah. So one of the hardest things about that credit unions face versus going back to what James was talking about, a small business, is that you have a board of people on the credit union board that are mostly retired. One of the credit unions said that their average age of their board is deceased, which AARP was for the young pups in that room. But most of these people have been retired. They're used to a completely different work environment than what they're seeing today. I had a board member one time tell me, well, I don't understand why my CEO of my credit union would ever need to make $100,000 a year because I never made more than $40,000 a year on the factory line. Well, that person that's worked on the factory line doesn't know how to run a business and doesn't know the challenges that they are facing today with multiple different generations. So that handcuff of having to basically go to a board, and your board is made up of volunteers, people that had the free time to join the credit union, not necessarily the best expertise. So I think that's one of the major hurdles. And then as James talked about, the C-suite right now is trying to maybe even take care of themselves in ways that they haven't been able to, and trying to get them, 5 to 10 years out from retirement is a whole different goal than trying to build up your next generation of leaders and retain the people. Most of those credit unions are seeing that as mutually exclusive goals, and it doesn't have to be. You can do both at the same time.
Branch visits have declined over 55% since 2019, according to the American Bankers Association. Today, 55% of banking customers use mobile apps as their primary banking method, and 80% of consumers want text communication during the loan process. The shift to digital, it's made growth more efficient and scalable, but it's also made community connection a little bit less authentic. So let's kick this off with you, James. If a community is no longer defined by a branch or a location, how can credit unions intentionally build it in new ways?
The interesting thing here is it really ties back to the thing they probably have on their wall. It's a paperweight on their desk. It's something that may be a screensaver. It's called the mission. What is the mission of the organization? What is the purpose? Some people call it a cause. When you think about community, when I think about community, you often see people coming together for things that mean something to them. So think about like a cancer walk or some other type of local event where people are coming together to raise money or raise awareness. That is real community. You go into a church or some type of other place like that. You're seeing people that are coming together because they have like thoughts, right? That is community. So credit unions don't have to have people coming to necessarily the branch in order to accommodate that, because they already know that's not going to happen. Or you can just pound the desk and hope that it will. But the reality is what you really need to be doing is getting your message about what you believe and what you're trying to accomplish to people who think the same way that you do. That's through digital channels. That's through getting it out there, social media, videos. How do we connect with this audience of people that we know exist that frankly would probably love to know more about us in a way that's meaningful to them? It's about putting your message where it matters the most, which has to include digital plus physical outreach, but it's got to be reversed from what it used to be. We used to think our sponsors are going to send people to the credit union. We're going to bring those people in and we're going to convert them into advocates for the credit union. We now need to be the advocates and go out to our sponsor groups, out to our community, and bring those people back to us.
So it starts with the mission, and I agree with you here, James, because I'm a part of a lot of online communities, and I've never once felt like, oh, there's no physical location, so I'm not part of this community. No, we meet up on Zoom calls, we meet up on digital channels and message boards, and we still commune. We're just doing it in a different way, right? I want to kick it to the top for you, David, and you can certainly add on to what James said, but for you, how should credit unions, in your opinion, think about building community when that physical in-person vibe is no longer in the equation as much as it once was?
Yeah, so tying into the mission statement, I think they need to think about what is the value that they bring. And unfortunately, a lot of credit unions think of themselves as a community bank, or they're a bank light. And I'm guilty. I have not been ever to my bank in 20 years. They don't even have a location in my city. So from a checking savings transaction, that's not where the value is. Where I have a local relationship with my credit union is because there's value there in other services. The things that I've seen credit unions do to be really successful is, as James said, is either go out into the community or bring the community into your location. So while every bank is trying to minimize and become basically an ATM with no space, no area to save on real estate, credit unions I've seen who have built in conference centers to let local organizations, local business organizations, local charity organizations come in and use the facilities, basically being a tool for the community, have huge interactions. People coming in and doing things all the time. Not to be like the financial YMCA of the local town. However, that's the stuff they do. They'll have like shred days where people can bring private documents that they don't want to throw in the trash, all that stuff, and have a professional shred day. One of the things here in Dallas that's always a pain is Christmas time. If you want to go take pictures with Santa Claus, it's a multi-wait type of thing, multi-day wait where you sign up. They'll send you a text within a 2-hour window for you to go wait in line for 2 to 3 hours to take a picture at the local mall or something like that. But I've had credit unions basically bring in a paid Santa, and said, hey, while you're doing your banking with us, if you'd like to get your kid's picture taken with Santa, let us help you be more efficient with your time and day. Those are the things that really draw people in and create loyal clients as opposed to consumers.
I heard shred days, David, and for a second I thought you meant I could bring my heavy metal band and just take my guitar out and start shredding in the credit union. Not that type of shred day.
Maybe we should. Maybe do a karaoke or band event at the credit union. I'll come listen. I won't participate.
The possibilities are endless, but you raise a good point, and it's actually, I've never even really thought about that or heard that before, but opening it up to the community. Stop sort of forcing your hand on them and let them kind of use you as the tool, as the infrastructure, if you will. And even if you can't bring your guitar in and shred, there's a number of other things you can do to bring in the community. James, anything you want to add on this? Because this is a pretty cool topic, and I don't think enough people are talking about it.
Ironically, I was telling people earlier, hey, we need to get into the modern way of thinking. We need to come back to this new age way of thinking. We need to stop trying to solve old problems the old ways, do it the new way. But here's the reality of how credit unions came into existence, right? Not given a deep history lesson, but it was essentially a community of people coming together to solve common problems and using creativity to do that. Somewhere along the way, credit unions have lost their ability to be creative. We say we've got this tiny little box that we have to operate in. And for years, I've been saying, let's get rid of that box. Let's throw it away. That's what we've got to start thinking about. If you really want to make an impact in the community, you've got to start thinking about how can I do that in a way that I haven't thought about before? How do I know what my target audience is? And then how do I go gravitate towards them and have them gravitate towards me in a way that's meaningful and creative, new and different?
Is your credit union one of the many facing employee benefit increases of 20, 30, or even 40% this year? CU Benefit is a QSO designed to help credit unions solve this problem and unlock their balance sheet. CU Benefit helps with retaining valued employees, supporting your not-for-profit mission, and offsetting rising benefit costs that have become one of the biggest discussions on this show. It isn't just something you have to accept. Your credit union holds significant potential in its existing assets. CU Benefit makes it easy to unlock that potential with exclusive investment options, customized strategies, and expert counsel to guide complex financial and human capital decisions. CU Benefit's proven process is designed to economically improve your bottom line, not just add to your expense ledger. CU Benefit works with you to increase net income, sometimes more than 50%, and generate investment returns 4 to 5 times more than what you are currently earning on most bonds. By generating greater revenue from these strategic financial solutions, CU Benefit helps you cover as much as 100% of employee benefit expenses, drive financial stability, create a competitive advantage in the talent market, and improve your member services by funding a stronger employee environment with CU Benefit. Learn more at cubenefit.com. Succession planning just went from a nice-to-have to a must-have necessity. Starting January 1st, a new rule requires boards to approve and own a written succession plan, and new directors must demonstrate working familiarity with it within 6 months. So that means boards can no longer assume leadership continuity will just fall into place naturally. They actually have to prove that they know their stuff. James, I want to start with you here. Succession planning, it just moved from trust to proof. We've talked about this topic a lot on the show, but I want to know, what does this change really mean for credit unions going forward?
Honestly, it really means that it's migrating. So I think it would be reckless to suggest that it's suddenly going to become this massive expectation, but it's going to migrate in that direction where there's going to be an actual legitimate expectation that directors are meeting certain obligations, both from an intellectual perspective, but also from a knowledge perspective and a governance perspective. I don't think it's a switch. I don't think MCUA is going to look at it that way, but I think that there is going to be an expectation that you're moving in that direction. What's happening is, we talked about that maybe the average board of a credit union is deceased in some places earlier, right? So if you think about that, you got to be thinking about what are we doing to move the needle to put the board members that we have today in a position where they can be successful. Then you got to be thinking about what are we going to be doing to ensure that there's a pipeline of people that are coming behind them that have equal capacity to be successful. So when a board changes, a board member seat changes, a board seat changes, what's actually happening at the credit union that gets that person up to speed? I think that's the biggest element that often gets missed. It's, oh gosh, we lost a board member, we've got to put a new one in. Yes, obviously that's true, but what are you doing to educate them, to prepare them, and to put them in a position to meet their actual responsibilities? But then it goes beyond that. The board also has to understand from a leadership perspective and from a management perspective, what's actually happening inside the credit union. And the smaller the credit union gets, the more risky that becomes, right? When you start thinking about a succession plan, what we don't need to have in credit unions is, well, if the CEO leaves, because guess what? It's likely to happen. When the CEO leaves, it shouldn't be, well, we're going to call somebody and hope that maybe they can find us a CEO in 3 months or 6 months. It shouldn't be that. It should be we're preparing ahead of time. So you got to be thinking about the things that we've been talking about before. Are we engaged with our community? Do we have a pipeline of people who want to be part of our credit union, either as employees or volunteers? From a compensation standpoint, from an employee engagement standpoint, do we have enough to offer? Whether you're an entry-level employee, a mid-level employee, or an executive, to get you to want to stay. And the reality is, if you're only thinking, gosh, I cannot X, I cannot Y, I cannot Z, you're going to be right. But if you say, here's what we need to do, we need to move in this direction and start thinking about creative ways to think about compensation, to think about complete compensation for your employees, education for your employees, to move them from where they are, to find that talent and bring it along. There's a way to do it. There are lots of creative ways to do it, and it's available to credit unions right now. I think NCUA wants credit unions to start doing this, but to do that, you've got to get out of the box and start thinking different.
So when we're thinking about that talent pipeline, as James is, referring to, how to cultivate it with the right benefits and et cetera, David, how are you thinking about succession planning?
I love that the NCUA did this because we have to have those uncomfortable conversations with executive teams and boards. And nobody wants to think about the worst case scenario. What happens if? Or, what happens if this person passes away? What happens if this person leaves? What if this person that we have as this next leader gets a great offer because he gets an opportunity to lead sooner than the opportunity here? Kind of always take a look at, do you take a carrot or a stick approach? I'm always going to be on the carrot side versus, the stick approach where you're trying to penalize somebody for leaving. What we've really been talking with boards and CEOs about is, as part of that succession plan, backing it up with incentives, whether golden handcuffs, golden parachutes type of things, where you are incentivizing the next level of leadership by investing in them today with resources, with educational opportunities, making sure that they're ready to take up that mantle whenever that's there. Because if you don't, and I've seen so many credit unions this happen to, then you're going to be, like James said, stuck where you're reaching out to a recruiting firm and paying 150% times the expense of trying to get that executive to come here. If you don't want to be always putting out fires, then you need to have a plan in place with the resources and tools behind it that shows your team that you're committed to them and their future success.
So many good points there. You talk about the recruiter. That's not talked enough about, is the recruiting fees and all this money that goes into finding that next individual to lead. And then, not for nothing, James, but we started this podcast with the idea of building a peer network where leaders could come on and share insights, not just for each other, but to train the next generation of leaders. Without a succession plan, you're basically throwing the middle finger up at the next generation of the up-and-comers, in my opinion. Anything you want to add there, James?
Yeah, it's almost always unintentional. There aren't very many malicious leaders, I don't think, that are actively out there trying to hold down possible talent in their organization. They're just ignorant to what they're doing that's causing those people to leave, or not doing that's encouraging those people to stay. That knowledge gap between what's actually happening and what they perceive should be happening is frankly ignored. And so what happens is, as a result, we find ourselves in this place where we're going, oh, how could this have happened to us? We had this great culture. We had this great yada, yada, yada. The reality is, what actually happened was you ignored people. You ignored the needs that were in your organization. You didn't mean to. You gave them cookies and pizza, but what they really wanted was an opportunity to grow as a professional and to find a way to climb to the seat that you're sitting in someday. That just gets lost too frequently, and we've got to find a way to be creative. I keep saying that creative is important. We got to be a way to be creative, to think about things, and to stop assuming that the way that it was in 1995 is the way it's going to be in 2026.
We've been talking about how credit unions are caught in a squeeze, right, throughout this whole episode. Benefit costs, they keep rising. You and I have discussed this previously, James. The talent market is super brutal with fintechs and big banks offering a lot more money, quite frankly, than a lot of these credit unions out there. NCUA has all these guidelines, these limitations on where you can invest. So I'm assuming that most leaders think that these constraints are fixed, that you either cut benefits or accept thinner margins. So I'm just kind of wondering, we'll start with you, David. How does CU Benefit help credit unions solve for these rising benefit costs that we're seeing?
So you take a look at the largest credit unions out there. I won't name names, but there's a credit union out there that has $5.8 billion, that's with a B, in the stock market to offset their employee benefit cost. So they obviously see that they need to have a huge investment getting a decent rate of return in order to offset these rising benefit costs. The average rising benefit cost for the last 25, 26 years has been about 6% per year. And when credit unions look at their margins, their investments, what they're earning on their loans, that arbitrage that they're earning is usually much less than 6%. So what are they to do? Most of them don't want to take the risk of putting all their money in the stock market, trying to hope and pray that the timing is just right and that it's going to do well. And they don't want that negative impact to their net income. So what we really do here is take a look at ways to ladder the credit union's investments using the 701.19 regulation, which allows them to have access to investments they normally don't have access to, as long as the gains or the interest is used to offset employee benefit cost. So we let the credit unions build their own risk profile from zero principal risk to minimal volatility and build almost kind of like an endowment, like a college builds an endowment to offset rising tuition cost. And over the last 20 plus years, we've lost 10,000 credit unions, the number of credit unions. And the number one reason has been consolidation because the human capital cost has been rising too much that they have to get to the economies of scale to where bigger has more resources to be able to do that. Well, we all know that the more credit unions, the ones that are local to the community, are going to know their community and serve their community better. So if we can help the $20 million credit union stay around to help serve their community and members, just like we can help a $5 billion credit union be able to have an impact, well, that's a win in our book. And that's what we see. And our credit unions are having that success to where now they have all of their employee benefits paid for out of this program, out of this bucket. And that money that they were spending is now being able to be reinvested into improving the member experience.
Okay, we're talking about this 701.19 rule. To me, this is like a longitude, latitude type of language. I don't even know what we're talking about here. So for listeners, what is 701.19?
Yeah, so 701.19 is an NCUA regulation that allows credit unions to invest in investments they normally can't. They don't normally have access to. And the only catch is that if they invest money into these investments, that the interest or growth must be applied towards their employee benefit cost. So whatever you make in these investments is a direct investment into their employees.
James, talk about this off the record. You and I had a conversation, and if you could maybe cite some of these numbers, but just to kick things off on your end, David mentioned 6% increase, which is actually really that's a smiley sun life on the beach scenario. You've talked to peers who have seen major benefit increases way beyond 6%. Do you mind kind of sharing?
Yeah, no, I that was the first thing that came to my mind too. 71% I've heard. 71% for this year, right? 71% increase. I've seen 46%. I've seen people that are constantly getting 18 to 26% increases. So you've also got to couch it when you're looking at it from a perspective of these numbers that are coming across nationally aren't for credit unions, they're for businesses. And now when you say now you're looking at small business, you're looking at credit unions that functionally operate small businesses and the constraints that come on that, it squeezes it even more. So from a credit union perspective, that increase is even higher. And as a credit union leader, when I start thinking about those things, I start thinking about, I've got to find a way to solve this problem, and I cannot plan to do it in a way that I've done it before. I've got to do something different. And so when I started thinking about that, and we started thinking about, we're going to go out, and my personal mission is to ensure that today's youngest generation still has grandchildren that know a credit union. I've got to surround myself with companies like CU Benefit that are doing the work that's outside the box, that gives credit unions a chance to compete, a chance to solve a problem that otherwise they would just put their head on the desk and bang their head against the desk thinking, how am I going to solve this problem? Well, I guess I've got a 71% increase. I'm going to have to push that to the employees and just hope that maybe my talent doesn't go away, but it's not going to work that way. And the attrition rate, the loss rate, all of those things are going to keep happening. And so that's the problem that CU Benefit really solves, is it comes in and it gives a credit union a pathway to solve a problem that otherwise they wouldn't be able to solve, and frankly, use a rule that was built specifically to do it.
David, how come you think some credit unions, or many or most, are just simply not picking up on the strategies and some of the things that you're doing when it comes to funding these benefits?
Yeah, so most industries are kind of a follow the leader. So just doing what everybody's been doing. So the rule first came out in 2003 and the NCUA was doing this. What happened was the industry copied what the banks were doing, and banks were buying life insurance. There's definitely a need and a value of life insurance. However, the credit unions lose the tax advantages by being tax exempt. They don't receive that benefit. And unfortunately, the life insurance products are also very costly, as well as the rates of return are not that good. They also happen to pay the company selling them the most amount of commission and earnings. So I don't want to say that's why they continue to do that, but that's just what the industry has done for so long. In fact, when I was in the industry and doing this, I couldn't understand why credit unions were doing this way. I thought there was something wrong with me or something that with the rules that I didn't understand. And I remember one of my oldest clients, I was like, hey, can you arrange a meeting with the NCUA because they won't talk to a third-party vendor? I just figure there's some unwritten rule that I don't know of. And after that call, realizing that no, the industry was wrong and didn't have to be done this way, all of a sudden, my credit union at the time leaned over to me and said, this is huge. Why have they not been telling us this? Since then, it's really just about having access to all the solutions. And when I kind of lift up the curtain behind it to show the credit unions how the sausage is made, they look behind the scenes and they go, oh, well, this is what makes the most sense. This is what we should be doing. And it's very logical. It's the whole mystery of how these investments work and what companies offer what, somebody trying to sell something, as opposed to what I always tell credit unions is that we're agnostic when it comes to the solutions. Whatever is best for you is what's best for us. And we have access to everything. So we don't ever go in there with an agenda, and everything that we do is customized for every credit union, what their financial situation is, what their risk situation is, and what their people needs are. And I think that a lot of the big companies that are out there are kind of more of a factory. Like if you fit the mold, great. If you don't, too bad. That's what the mold is. That's what you got to do. Being a CUSO, we treat them like we would treat ourselves, do things for our own people. So that's the approach that we take.
James, you are not somebody that is going to speak positively about a product or service in this space unless it really delivers. That's just who you are. To close things out, just kind of talk to me why you're such a believer in CU Benefit and give me your philosophy on this one, because you're not a dude that's just going to endorse anything willy-nilly.
Yeah, you're right about that. All great things sometimes take effort and take the ability to put your work behind it. Moving philosophically from the mold of doing it the old way, which is we're gonna get these insurance products that are specific to executives, that we're gonna just go that route, and that's how we're gonna use this rule, to, oh, you know what? We could actually make our employees' lives better. We could actually do something to help improve and pre-fund all this stuff that people say they want that we don't know how to pay for. Suddenly it's there. Is there risk involved? Of course there's going to be risk involved. Most great things have risk, right? You can minimize that risk. To David's point, you can choose your risk appetite. Are third parties, examiners, people like that going to look at it and go, wait, maybe I don't understand exactly what you're doing? Probably. Is it worth that effort to get to the end goal? I believe the answer is emphatically yes. And so the last element I would say is, I remember sitting across from somebody who was operating a credit union 401k plan. And I had looked at the back page and I saw that they were earning 75 basis points on my employees' investment for every dollar that they put in, right? So the return that the employee could get on that was being reduced because the broker was charging a fee. So when I go out and I look for people to partner with, to share my time with, to advocate for, I'm looking for people who actually want to make a difference and impact in a positive influence on the credit union industry. David's one of those people. His company is one of those people. 99 times out of 100, a credit union is never going to see an invoice for services from CU Benefit. That is a difference maker in this landscape and in this marketplace. And that's one of the main things that pushes me forward. We got to think different. We've got great tools. We've got a solution that's built for credit unions, owned by credit unions. And now on top of that, credit unions can access it and they're not getting charged for the service. Plus they're getting a better return and their employees are in a better place. Come on, man. That's a win.
All right, let's come in to the wrap up here. David, do you have any final thoughts or plugs that you would like to throw down for our listeners?
It's interesting. I was thinking about that. And, most businesses will want to say, hey, let me share with you my successes and tout that to get you guys to work with us. One of the ones I'd like to share with you is one of the failures, one of the credit unions that decided not to work with us. And the reason was that they had the old Coley-Boley split dollar program. And they said, David, your program is so much better than what we have today that if we implemented this, the younger executives would be getting a better, more richer benefit than our senior leadership. And that would cause a huge issue inside of our culture. So because we're stuck in this old program, we can't do this because it would upset the balance that we have. While I was kind of blown away to lose that possible prospect, it was one of the best compliments that I've ever gotten because they did the due diligence, they ran the numbers, and at the end of the day, they said, okay, it does what it says it's going to do, and if it did, it would be great for this one group of employees, but to our senior leadership, it would be unfair because they can't get into it because they already had something in place. So what I always tell our credit unions is that the best thing that you can do is not believe me and think that it's too good to be true. But if you'll do the due diligence and actually go through the information and work with the references, then you'll find that it's too good to pass up. And that's what we see at the end of the day.
James, let me pass the microphone over to you. Final thoughts, plugs, my man.
Yeah, November 14th, I walked out of a credit union door, at least for the last time for now. My mission at the time was, let's go. Let's go and let's find a way to help as many credit unions as possible. Get outside the box, get rid of that box. And that's the mission that drives me every day. That's why I'm here right now. That's why I work with David. That's why we do these things, to try to put credit unions in a position to succeed. So my challenge to the audience, my challenge to the industry is don't lay down. You're going to be challenged. You're going to have people that say you're not doing it the right way. They're going to have people that are saying maybe what you're doing is the wrong thing. And maybe they're right, but what if they're wrong? You've got to find a way to connect with your members, your community, and your talent to make a difference. We've got to find a way to make sure this industry survives and thrives. And that's not a big four scenario. We need to have credit unions and communities all across the country that are local to them and serving those people. I'm going to spend my time for as long as I can chasing that dream. And I challenge this audience to chase it with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's very inspirational. If you want to chase that dream here, head on over to cubenefit.com. You'll learn more. I really like what the both of you are doing right now, and I really implore my audience to check them out, cubenefit.com. I want to thank them for being a wonderful sponsor. Want to thank you, David, for being a great guest. James, you've been a co-host so many times on the show now. I love having you on. Thank you very much for bringing your energy and your passion. And I got to thank our listeners for continuing to support another episode of Grow Your Credit Union. If you like the show, please follow us on your podcast player of choice If you want to be a guest or would like to talk about sponsorship opportunities, head to growyourcreditunion.com to learn more. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.